we're starting part 2 today, and part 2 kicks off with the pond shield. Finally came. Not like I was waiting too long. Amazon gets here pretty quick. So what I need to do and what you all would need to do before you actually apply the pond shield to the plywood aquarium is I need to sand this down with 60 grit sandpaper. So let's go ahead and get started.
Two 2,000 years later.
Alright, I feel like this next part deserves a little bit more explanation from me. So even though the sped up video may fool you into a sense of putting the epoxy on being easy, it was anything but. It was actually quite difficult. It wasn't like putting on paint at all. In my opinion, it was a lot harder. It was like I was forcing this epoxy mixture onto the wood, and I was actually moving quite quickly, obviously not as quickly as this video sped up, but to cover as much as I could within 30 minutes, which is 30 minutes is actually within the time frame where the epoxy starts to kind of harden and get a lot harder to put on. It was already initially quite difficult to spread across this tank, and you'll see that the first coating, at least, which this is, gets absorbed quite heavily into the wood, and you'll see that in some of these pictures. You can see most of the plywood still, unfortunately, and I wasn't all that happy with how the first coating looked. However, in the directions it does note that the first coating will be absorbed and you will require most of the time more than one coating. So my next step was actually sanding it down and getting the seams. Now I did the seams on a whole different day. I was already pretty upset about how the first coat turned out, and I wanted to make sure I get the seams as close to perfect as possible, with this being the first time I've ever taken this on. So the first thing I did was exactly how Joey did in his video, and I applied a heavy layer of epoxy down to the sanded seams, just to basically help the seams absorb a little bit more of that epoxy. So you kind of put it down heavy initially. Next, you'll see me slowly start with the fiberglass cloth around the seams. I used my hands and fingers heavily for this. I also used the squeegee as much as I could, but you'll see as this continues, I start to use my hands more and more. So note to self, wear gloves. You'll actually see me put gloves on for the second part of this for the seams. So learn your lesson. And then I applied the epoxy again fairly heavily to the seams, on top of the seams, after I had put them down where I needed them to be. Now you'll see this corner, I finally had put the gloves on. I learned my lesson, and it's a lot easier to actually kind of finesse the seam and make sure everything is correctly placed with your fingers than the squeegee, in my opinion. And that epoxy is not something you want to get on your skin. It is very hard to get off, but if you do choose to do this without gloves, make sure that you scrub your hands with alcohol afterwards. It'll be a lot easier to get the epoxy off with alcohol rather than soap. It's very cringe looking back at this video. That's my that's my concentration face. You can see me kind of overlap. The pieces I cut were a little too long, so I would just go onto the next seam if it was too long. Again, applying very heavy coating of the mixture of epoxy to the seams.
All right, so let's get into a tank update. Plywood aquarium update. All right, so things have been going extremely slowly here. Mainly, to be honest with you, just because I am terrible at this epoxy. I'm terrible. I've applied one coating. I really don't like the way it looks, even though in Pond Shield's instructions it says that the first coating is not going to cover everything. You can see through, and I'll show you right now, you can see through to the wood. It's not a very heavy coating. That first coat doesn't get you very far. You can see just kind of how light it is. You can see through to the plywood. I've done the seams. The seams were a pain in the butt. You can see the fiberglass cloth was not easy at all to deal with, but we struggled through it. So, what am I doing today? I am thankful to announce that I am going to be sanding it down and applying the last coating to the interior, at least, of Pond Shield, because then I obviously have to brace the top still, and then I'm going to be applying Pond Shield to that, so I may as well buy stock in Pond Shield at this point. But yeah, so I've gone through two kits, I guess they're called, two kits of Pond Shield after today. After I applied this last coating, it will be two kits. And then I will end up buying another kit just so I can make sure the bracing on top is waterproof. So everything is adding up in cost just a little bit, all right? And it is still a mess down here. It is water change day, so I got the water running in the back. But excited that I won't have to be dealing with Pond Shield or applying epoxy in general for much longer. Then the fun comes. I think I'm going to actually enjoy painting the exterior of the tank. That's going to be fun. That's going to be awesome. I think I'm going to go with a gray for the majority of the tank, and possibly black in certain areas, just jet black, because the interior, as you can see, is just going to be white. I want everything to be nice and just a rich, light white color, so these black diamond stingrays just pop. So stay tuned. I'm going to be attaching some videos of me during this process, and then also another part of this particular video is going to be me installing the glass panel, which again is right there. You guys can't see it, I promise it's there. And that will be interesting as well. So that's going to require some silicone, which I think I'm going to need some new silicone, which is no big deal at the end of the day. But that will also be in this section, so stay tuned. All right, just put on coating number 2. So definitely you can see there's like a noticeable difference as far as being able to see through to the wood. Now there still are certain areas, like this side in particular, you can still kind of see the plywood. But then again, I did just put this thing, this last coating on, so it will have the next 48 hours to kind of cure, and then hopefully I'll get a little bit better idea of what the interior may look like. But so far, just, you know, even now, just after putting it on, it looks even better than it did before. So definitely encouraging. Stay tuned for some more updates. All right, here's me putting on the actual epoxy. Now, I actually made the mistake of forgetting to sand it down. You really should sand around your viewing frame before you put down the epoxy. So that was a big mess up on my part. And again, we'll see at the end of the day if that makes or breaks this tank. I'm hoping something small like that
doesn't mess up the tank, but you never really know. So forgot to sand it down before epoxying. And here you're going to actually see me install the top brace. I have 2.5-inch screws. They're going to be helping me out. They're going to pass through both walls of the actual plywood and into the actual bracing, which is going to be 3/4-inch plywood. Okay, got the first part of the bracing up top done. Notice 3/4-inch gap here that I'm going to be coming across with 3 braces, one at the end, one in the middle, and then one here screwed in from the sides.